Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Building the Virtuous Community with the Mainstay Foundation. We're really excited to bring you this show covering a variety of different topics and with a variety of different guests. The idea being, how do we actually build a virtuous community? What are the elements that go into it, and how can we foster those elements so that we have a strong community here, locally, globally, and wherever we may be? Within that, we were discussing and have been discussing a series of topics. Last week, we talked about spirituality in Islam, being that this is the heart of the element of being a good Muslim, a good follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. This week, we build on that concept on the idea of leadership, a very, very pivotal conversation and a very pivotal topic for our community at large. You see, leadership may not necessarily be what you think it is. It may be very different because leadership may be something that you may think and associate it with someone being a CEO or a president or something of that nature. But you may find that you, as an individual, wherever you may be a parent, you may be a child, you may be a youth leader, you have leadership capabilities and capacity within you to affect change. Leadership is a broad topic, and it's something that really entails many things. But for our conversation's sake, we may start at a place by saying that leadership is actually helping things happen that weren't going to happen otherwise. So, for example, that may entail spoken leadership, that may entail silent leadership, that may entail various aspects of leadership, and getting things done that were not going to happen otherwise. That may be for humanitarian purposes, that may be for poverty alleviation purposes, that may be for a variety of other issues such as mental health, social justice, whatever you may be passionate about as an individual. Within the Islamic framework, how can you actually foster change? Given this dynamic, we have a panel of excellent individuals on this topic who have a variety of experience on leadership matters at the local, national, and international levels. And I'd like to welcome them onto our show, beginning with our guest, Shan Abbas Hashim. Assalamu alaikum to you. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. And of course, Sayyid Hassan Al-Hakeem. Thank you, Sayyidina, for joining us. We really appreciate your presence. We have shared through our platforms the bios of the respected guests. I invite you to look into that further to see where they're coming from. And I think it would be very worthy to do so. Starting from this point, I want to begin by actually sharing, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. My doctoral research interest is related directly to this topic of leadership because it's something that has a very profound impact by influencing particular individuals and particular groups of individuals, I should say. We can actually foster change in our world. In the academic literature, I'll come from the academic perspective. Our respective guests are practitioners. I'm what would be called a theoretist, a theoretical practitioner in some sense of this, but the individuals that we have on the show are actually doing this on the ground. And so from the theoretical perspective, there's a wealth of knowledge on this issue of leadership that started from an environment of this one iconic charismatic leader. So there's one individual who moves mountains, and that was the concept of leadership in academia. But as this progressed, and in society at large, the idea said that no, there's much more nuance to this topic. That is, if you ask people, and there have been surveys, if you look at a book like The Leadership Challenge, which I invite our audience to look at, is perhaps one of the most pivotal books on the area of leadership. It says if you survey people about what they see as a leader, and you put CEOs, business leaders for their own circle, like who's a leader, CEOs, political leaders, sports and entertainment leaders, family, teachers. The first on this list of the most important leaders in people's lives, according to researchers, is actually your family, your husband, wife, spouse. And the second level is then teachers and people who have a direct connection to you. Then 7% of them were actually CEOs. So what the researchers gleaned was leadership is actually very personal in nature. It goes person to person. And that authenticity and that truth. I remember a billionaire, a very prominent Indian entrepreneur or Indian ancestry entrepreneur in America. He said, he was asked about management. He owns a company called 5 Hour Energy, a very renowned company in America. He said, if you want to know about management, just look at a mother. They said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, a mother is raising a bunch of children on a fixed budget in an environment where she's learning on the go. And so there you can learn a lot of life valuable lessons that you can apply to other parts of life. And I think that's a really important element because it builds from there about how you foster leadership and change. I know we have audience members who are very passionate about different topics, whether it's women's rights, whether it's social justice, whether it's mental health awareness, whether it's poverty alleviation, whether it's delivering water to certain parts of the world, food to certain parts of the world, other things that you may be passionate about. This conversation is pertinent to you because if you don't take a stand and you don't step up, it's very possible that that change doesn't happen. Having said all of this, I'm going to turn to our panel now, going first to Sayyid Hassan, to kind of give us a framework about, well, what does leadership mean? And in particular, in an Islamic context, when we say leadership, what do we mean? Sayyid Hassan, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Shan. Assalamu alaikum, dear audience. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for hosting me today in this very insightful conversation that I personally looking forward to learn from you, Sayyid Shabbir, since you're also studying this and you're an expert, and also from our dear brother Shan, inshallah. Um, so your question, Sayyidina, regarding leadership and the Islamic perspective from it. So basically, we need to look at what do we mean by leadership. So is it the whole concept of authority? So are we looking at it from the authority aspect, from the position aspect? If we're looking at it from that angle, the leadership is very clearly defined in Islam from that angle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, indeed, Allah is your guardian and his messenger and the believers, and he gives the specific attributes of those believers that we believe as followers of Ahlul Bayt, that those believers are the 12 Imams, alayhim salam. So infallible human beings who are immaculate human beings who deliver directly to us what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us and guide us towards what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So if we look at from the authority aspect, of course, this might extend even more within the theological aspect and jurisprudential aspect. Islam gives some authority for the father and the mother over their children, and sometimes a grandfather, sometimes a jurist, a judge over others. However, if you look at the leadership is from the concept of guidance and giving a direction or leading. So the whole word leadership is coming from lead, is to lead towards a direction, towards a point, towards a goal. Every and each one of us is a leader in a sense. So we are leading each other and leading our colleagues and our friends within the work environment, within the family environment, within any kind of group environment, whether we lead a discussion or lead an idea or lead an action and give guidance, and we'll learn from each other. So that's kind of a very broad kind of meaning of a leadership. If you again want to put that broad meaning within the framework of Islam, the way that I personally would look at it, I would look at it back. I would take it back to the original idea of the purpose of our creation. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, when He created us, and He gave us the purpose of worshiping Him to reach to our highest potential. So again, when we talk about leadership, we need to understand what is the goal here, because without a goal, we are not leading anyone, or no one is leading us towards anything. So the goal of and the purpose of the creation is to reach their highest potential. So the within the Islamic framework, who can help you to reach to this potential that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala embedded in you and gave you the possibility or ability to reach as a human being. That's the leadership that can be fulfilled by probably anyone who knows this path. It can be a mother who's raising and teaching her children. It can be a father. It can be a scholar. It can be a resident alim. It can be even a manager in your business.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Sidna. And I think you highlighted some aspect that's very important. In fact, in the academic literature, there was this first idea of this heroic, iconic leader. Then they said, no, leadership is much more nuanced. There's dynamics on the leadership, but also the followership. Then they talked about interpersonal leadership. So if there's two people who are colleagues at the same level, they also exert leadership dynamics on one another. And so there's a long, long history in the literature and a long conversation of frameworks and all that. But I think the best argument may come from Peter Drucker, who's written on my second recommendation for our audience is The Effective Executive, an excellent book on leadership as well, which he basically essentially said a leader is simply someone who has followers. And that's the only consensus that can be drawn on this concept. Now, followers may not necessarily mean what you think it means. There's a little nuance there as well. It may be direct or implicit or explicit influence. These are elements of the equation as well. But nonetheless, we'll leave that at that. I want to build on what Sayyid Hassan has said here, and turning to Shan Abbas Hashim. Both of these individuals have tremendous experience on the international front, but also at the grassroots, and I think that's very important here. When we talk about the theoretical aspect on Islam, which Sayyid Hassan just alluded to, Shan Abbas, if you could just highlight in terms of practice and practicality on the grassroots level. I know you've worked with the World Federation at the highest levels, as well as working in the grassroots and working with the community at large and having your own endeavors as well. So in terms of, there's a theoretical concept behind what a leader is. In terms of practice, is it that there's two dimensions? Is a leader necessarily someone who has two different dynamics in their world? The question I'm getting at is, can someone be a leader that's effective, but at the same time be someone who's ethical, principled, and has all of those elements of the equation? So if I'd love if you could share your thoughts on that, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Sayyid Shabbir, and thank you, Sayyid Hassan, as well. Pleasure to be on the panel with you. I mean, quite a lot of quotes, Sayyid Shabbir, about what is leadership and how do you tie the integrity element with the kind of the more skill set. I mean, one of the funniest quotes I've ever read about this is General George Patton, who was a general in World War I and World War II, and he says, very funny, he says, lead, follow me, or get out of my way. But actually, leadership isn't that. Leadership, that's just a general thing. That leadership, I mean, Warren Bennis, who I'm sure you've heard is a very good or very good scholar in the field of leadership, said, leadership is simply the capacity to turn vision into reality. I think Sayyid Hassan has touched on this really. I think leadership could be about authority, but actually for me, I think, especially in the community setting, in our family setting, in our social setting, leadership is not necessarily about authority, but about influence and the way we can influence certain things. We can do that either being in positional leadership. So for example, in my recent past being, for example, part of World Federation as a Secretary General or as a trustee, or it can be done outside of that position, but going in a specific area or a specific goal. I think the one thing that we are very fortunate, Sayyid Shabbir, is because we have our Ahlul Bayt, our madhab, and there we can combine kind of the skill set with the concept of integrity. So for example, let's say we look at Imam Ali's letter to Malik Ashtar, very famous letter, so many commentators have written about it. Imam Ali gives a lot of guidance to Malik Ashtar, but actually in there, he also talks, the very beginning, it's about humbleness, about integrity. And I think he repeats that, again, he even talks about taking constructive criticism. So I think leadership is a combination of both. And in the practical kind of life, I think leadership is about personal growth. So like if I look at my own journey, looking at myself now, as 35-year-old and looking at myself, say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, leadership is about maturity, about understanding, about, knowing your strengths and weaknesses and this type of thing. And most importantly, I think, is working with people, so it's not about you. And I think really sometimes in our community settings, leadership becomes about positional leadership. I want to sit on that seat. I want to be elected. I want to do this. And it comes so often because you feel good, you get something done and you feel good. But actually leadership is about what you collectively do and collectively achieve.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You mentioned Warren Bennis, who's definitely one of the main authorities in the space of academic. He mentioned something very interesting about when he was asked what is leadership, which I think may be of interest to he actually said the best definition that he's come across for leadership comes from Shakespeare. And he actually highlighted a particular act, and he said the lines that go along the lines of, well, anyone can call out to the dead. He said, yes, but the question is, will they come when you call onto them? And so the real idea here is, can you lead people when they don't have to follow you? As in, can you lead volunteers, for example? Can you get people passionate about a cause and actually lead them when you don't have a title or a position or anything? They have every right to leave you.
I think exactly. I agree with you, Sam. I think there's two key things that come out. One is energy. If you have that positive energy, around you, it becomes a magnetic force, for others. And I've seen in my life leaders, some of them who are now deceased now in our community, who had that positive energy, who had that drive, and it comes through. And the second point is sincerity, and both are very hard. It's hard to keep your energy level going. And honestly, it's hard to, be sincere all the time. It's a very tough balance there.
Absolutely. I wanted to come up to another question to Shan Abbas, and then I'm going to come back to Sayyid Hassan on this to elaborate perhaps. And so the idea here is, in terms of leadership on our community levels, I mean, there's a host of different things that need to be solved, and problems that need to be addressed, and things that even may need to be optimized on that front. So there's aspects of a leadership. It's not necessarily always roses. There's a good journey, and there's a bad journey, perhaps, if you will. There's this idea of there are good times and there are bad times. And I guess if you could shed some light for our audience on, how do you take the bad times, the difficult times, the challenging times of leadership, and sort of motivate, inspire, and keep your team going, the people who are in the boat with you, that you are captaining, so to speak. Is there a way to go about that and do that in a way that, that inspires others and also keeps people together in cohesion? To add a little bit more depth to this, in our communities, you see a lot of challenges, splits in communities happening, people going their own directions, egos getting in place, my way or the highway. And this happens at a whole slew of different levels, at the local level all the way up to the top. And this happens, and this is not limited to our communities, by the way. This is a global phenomenon of human nature. But there may be some ways to navigate this terrain. I know in management, there's this concept of projects and teams coming together, where you have this idea of forming, right? Forming, norming, storming, norming, performing. These are the different types of the 4 levels of a team, right? Where you're first forming, then you start storming. You start the different challenges emerge amongst the team dynamics. Then you start normalizing amongst the team. Then you start to know how each other operate, and you're not blaming each other. And then you start performing as a team. Analogously, are there some ways that our communities at large, and leaders and aspiring leaders in our communities, can come forward and say, hey, we can run a smooth operation, a well-oiled machine, so to speak, and there's a way to go about that?
So I think to say there's no magic bullet, if I'm being very, very honest with you. I mean, I've had the good times and the bad times. Even more recently, my last 3, 4, 5 months at World Federation was very, very tough as Secretary General, because we had an election issue, very polarizing, very, very difficult time. And, we're not in control of it as well, which makes it even worse, but you're still the face of the work. I think, first of all, it's a question of maintaining motivation, and that's not individual, that's a team. You have to remember why you're there, remember what your big picture is. If you lose sight of the big picture by looking at details, you're going to lose track very quickly. So you've got to have that big picture, why you came in, what kind of area do you want to leave, etc., etc. I think what I'm finding more and more, Sayyid, is leadership is more about interpersonal skills. So you may not agree with the other person, you may completely disagree with them on issues, but you've got to make sure you keep that authenticity, that relationship intact, even if you don't agree with them. It's very, very hard to do, particularly when there's age gaps, etc., when there's geographic gaps, locational gaps, and so on. It's very, very important to keep that rapport there, even if you disagree with someone. Build that rapport, maintain that rapport. And I think sometimes what can happen in our community is that things become very personal. So, let's say I disagree. For example, I'm just using Sayyid Hassan as an example. I disagree with Sayyid Hassan on a few issues. We end up then not speaking. We end up making a distance. We end up then becoming different teams, and then I think that becomes quite problematic for moving organizations forward. So we've got to just make sure we maintain the difference between work and that personal side.
Very good. So building on this idea, I'm going to come to Sayyid Hassan. I would like to get Brother Shan's view on this as well. There's this narrative, and in the popular literature, this used to be very common. Are leaders born or are they developed? This idea of the development of leadership. Do they come out of nowhere? Are they born that way? Is it nature or nurture? There's some very interesting concepts on this idea. I remember the works of an excellent leadership book that's actually come out recently from presidents of the US, 4 particular presidents. And it actually referred and highlighted that many of them came from very different backgrounds, yet the effectiveness was quite interesting to notice. Lincoln and Roosevelt, and the 2 Roosevelts, and then of course Johnson. These were the 4 that were presented. From the Islamic perspective and in general at large, are leaders developed? Do they come naturally? Is there an element of yes and no to both? If you could please shed some light on that, Sayyid Hassan.
So this takes us back again to the whole point that Brother Shan even mentioned, I mentioned in the beginning, in terms of leadership as an authority or as a position versus not as a position and authority. So there are certain authorities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created based on their will. So all the ma'sumin and the imams and the prophets, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigned as authority and as awliya for us to follow, they did that based on their decision and their will of being in this path, and Allah's knowledge that they will not commit a mistake and be astray. If I would look at the academic aspect, John Maxwell also has multiple books on leadership that I would like also to recommend. He has one of the books that the 5 levels of leadership, and he puts at the bottom of that is leadership by position. So because of who you are at this position, because you are the manager or the executive or the head of the center, people needs to follow you. And then it goes up, it goes to the second level, which is like because of the permission, in the sense that because people want to, so they give you the permission to lead them, you become their leader. Third one is the production, because what you're doing for the organization, people want to follow you. So people give you the permission to follow, then because of what you're doing for the organization, they are following you. Then the fourth one is people development. They are basically following you because of what they are doing to them. So they feel this direct impact that you have on them and what you've done to them. That's why they follow you. And the fifth one, which is the most important one, they follow you because of who you are and what you bring to the table. And basically, if I want to map that to the life of our imams, alayhi salam, most of them, they did not lead out of position. So we all know that the imams, as a position in this world, beside the theological position as an imama, and that we believe in, regardless of what people think or don't or reject, but them being on the top leading persons on the whether political or social, most of our imams, they were not. So except Imam Ali for a few years, the others, they were not practicing this position. However, they did not stop leading. They start impacting people's life, and they start even impacting the organization, being the whole ummah. If you want to look at the whole ummah as an organization, and impacting individuals' life, and people wanted to follow them. They actually, the way they impacted people to the right direction to reach to their potential, it was in a way that it was even a threat sometimes to certain individuals, which led to the conflict between them and the imams. So the idea here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he embedded in us, and here answering your question and your part of the question, and to link the point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in every and each one of us a potential. And the whole potential can be summarized in the verse of the Quran where inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. So I'm creating a khalifa. Of course, here khalifa, we are not talking about the word khalifa that everyone knows in the media, being the head of the state who's going to slaughter or terrorize the humanity. No, we are talking khalifa here, a representations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attribute and authority on earth. And that requires a manifestations of Allah's attribute on earth. So each one of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this potential to each human being. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, gave him this potential. Now how, and is there a will that we reach to this potential? That's the question. So if there is a will and there's a way, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draw this path and way through the Quran and through the hadith and through our Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to teach us how to reach to our highest potential. Now the question might rise, so I'm not born an imam, so I don't have that authority that's given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, theologically, we believe that because we did not choose to be an imam. That's why we are not born an imam. So again, it's our will. We did not will for ourselves to be an imam. And of course, this is for different discussion. It's a theological discussion about the imama and the position of the imama. But back to the leadership aspect, if we take that position and authority on the side, and talking about the leadership, about the principles that we bring to the people, and kind of the potential that we are enhancing within the people, or helping the people to reach to their potential, every one of us can be, if we choose to. However, we need to gain that attribute, because as John Maxwell said in his book, the level 5 leadership is people follow you because of who you are. So and in order for you to reach the other 4 levels, which is impacting the people, impacting the organization, and getting the people's permission to lead, you need to gain that attribute. So you need to gain and become the manifestations of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you need to become the manifestation of Allah's mercy, of Allah's justice, of Allah's wisdom. Of course, here we're talking all about relativeness. The absolute attribute is Allah himself. and the highest attribute is for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we are celebrating his birth in these days. And after him are our beloved Imams, alayhim salam, and Lady Fatima, the Ma'sumin, and the prophets and the messengers. So beyond that, we as a human beings, it's relative. So the highest level of wisdom we have, the more we can lead. So each one of us, relative to us and relative to our environment, we can lead within a spectrum of that relativeness.
Very, very well put. Very well put, Sayyid Hassan. Especially building on this idea of the Holy Prophet as a leader. You know, in fact, Michael H. Hart, although he criticized in places, he put the Holy Prophet as the most influential man in history. And he said this because simply he said, I have no choice, because every other person on this list either brought a spiritual system or a secular system. This is the only person who brought both and was supremely effective in both. And so there's no doubt that in a 23-year span, what the Prophet did was the height of leadership. And I think this built on this idea that, you know, he didn't come from necessarily...
23 years was the position part. The actual
right.
Is 63 years old. And the people known the Prophet as an Amin for 40 years before announcing the prophethood. And this is where you see the Prophet actually built his institution of leadership throughout time, from his birth until the announcement of the Nubuwwah and Risala and until his death.
Very, very well said. So there was definitely leadership in the 40s, although we may not categorize it as such. It's definitely there. Turning to Brother Shan Abbas, I'm just going to build a little bit on this. The same book that I was alluding to earlier about US presidents, I think the Holy Prophet being an orphan is an excellent example of someone that their whereabouts and their background doesn't necessarily mean that they're omitted from leadership by any sense. And, you know, if you look at American presidents, Lincoln and Roosevelt, Lincoln had to walk 5 miles in order to get to the nearest library. And his parents, you know, because he was a very tall and, you know, strong person, he was a resource on a farm. And so if you're going to study and read, you're a machine that's not being used on the farm, so to speak. And so his family was not very, you know, supportive of him. But Roosevelt had everything. He had all the bells and whistles. And yet they both, when you look at leadership, Lincoln's considered one of the greatest leaders in American history. Similarly, building on that, I was wondering about youth and female leadership. Is this an avenue in our communities to have youth leaders, female leaders? And I just want to highlight a quick story for our audience on this, that, you know, the vitalness of leaders. You know, sometimes you need someone to say, we're going to get this done. And I'm mentioning this not because of any political, this is much earlier. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who is now, but before he had actually endeavored on building the Shaukat Khana Memorial Hospital, the cancer facility in Pakistan. When he was building this, he brought the top 20 physicians in all of Pakistan and put them in a room. He said, what's the feasibility of having a world-class, on par with the Europe and the United States, cancer facility in Pakistan? That's number one. Number two, at no cost, at free of cost, or as minimal cost as possible. But his goal was free of cost. 19 of them straight away said, no, it's not possible. It's never going to happen. One of them said it's feasible, the first part. The second part, free of cost, is not possible. Nonetheless, he was very adamant about this, and he got to the point that they have a cancer facility, they're building a second one, or they have a second one. And on top of that, they give 70% of patients. They don't have 100%, but they're somewhere there. So there's this idea of leadership that needs to be maybe ignorance is bliss, if you will, or this idea of getting things done regardless of what the odds are. So I was wondering if you could build on that, Brother Shan Abbas, and say that youth leaders, female leaders, and having this determination as a leader to actually make things happen that weren't going to happen otherwise. How does this all fit in and actually becoming and going through the journey of a leader? Please share.
Thank you, Sayyid. I mean, I think that's a really, really good question. So I think just touching on, I mean, Sayyid Hassan talked about Prophet Muhammad. I mean, Prophet Muhammad's virtues is what made him a leader. I mean, he turned, you know, one of the most debased people in the history of humanity into caring people. And he did that through his caring nature, his akhlaq, etc. So there's that angle as well. Then you talk about Abraham Lincoln. I mean, this is a person of conviction. And I think when you talk about female leadership, I mean, to be very honest with you, Sayyid, I think that in our community, we are seeing a gap there in a positional sense. Females are leaders. I mean, every man is born from a female. I mean, we are, we are here because of women. And I think female leadership in our households is immense. I think in our culture, in our society, there are many reasons. I think we should explore why we're not getting enough females coming into positional leadership. And I personally feel that this is a disservice to our communities and to our madhab as well. I mean, if you look at famous female, kind of leaders of the part, Rosa Parks come to mind, Mary Curie come to mind. But actually, in our madhab, we have one of probably the greatest female leader of all time. Lady Zainab, for example, and Lady Fatima. I mean, Lady Zainab, is the protector of our imamat. I mean, her position is really quite immense, and the way she stood up to Yazid, the way she was the start of his downfall. We've got she's a real revolutionary. And she carried the message of Imam Hussein. So I think maybe culturally we have some blocks as to why maybe females are not coming forward. That might be in the ladies, it might be in the men, it might be in our society. But certainly we need to bring more female leaders through. I also think on youth leadership as well. I think really to be honest, we do have a need for a lot more youth to come forward in positional leadership positions in our community. And there's many reasons for this. One, because they would have a lot more skills, having lived in the West, having been brought up here, etc., to bring those skills to progress, to give that momentum to our institutions and organizations, etc. But I think also because I think youth can add a different dimension to the conversation, like women can to the conversation, and you get a more broad spectrum. And I think we're lacking this. I think we're lacking youth engagement in leadership positions. We have youth, for example, the Khoja community who are leading Jamaats, who are parts of global organizations, but we're not having enough coming through. And I don't know, we could have a discussion what the reasons really are for that.
I wanted to ask a pointed question here, if that's all right with Shan, about you came into leadership relatively young, I would say, in terms of your capacity. I think you're only about 25 or so. How was that experience? Were there challenges you had to deal with? Were there elements of that? What advice would you give to others who want to embark on the leadership journey relatively young?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of challenges. I mean, being taken seriously, working with elders, many of whom are, double, maybe even triple your age, so working with that age gap is an issue as well. But I think the advice for youngsters really is to, put yourself forward, get out of that comfort zone. If you're going to sit in your comfort zone and say, I'll do this, leadership position in 5 years, 10 years, and so on, that time may never come. Take that position and ideally take it with a team, take it with some like-minded youngsters as well. So you've got that support. And I was very lucky in all my time in WF and other places. I always had that support, other youngsters as well who were coming through with me as well.
Lovely. I think you highlighted one of my favorite quotes is actually from a speech from Teddy Roosevelt, the president of the US, and he gave it in France at the Sorbonne. And he said, the speech was called Citizenship in a Republic. And he essentially said, there's an excerpt of it, it's called The Man in the Arena. And he said the credit doesn't belong to the person who criticizes or points the finger and says that the man in the arena could have done this or that better, but rather the credit belongs to the one who's in the arena, on the arena, with their face marred with blood and sweat and tears and toil. And I think that's really what leadership is about standing up and taking a stand and doing something, regardless of the odds, regardless of what people may say or criticize.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's much better being in the battlefield than watching the battlefield from the side. And I think we have this, and I think this is a trait, amongst all society at the moment. We much rather on social media have a dig at those in leadership positions. It's much more better, much more constructive to actually be in that leadership position and give it your best shot than to sit there far away and have pops, have shots, etc. at people, because that doesn't lead to any constructive outcome.
Absolutely. And going back to the Prophet's example, I mean, anyone who saw what the Prophet was embarking on, it was literally impossible. Of course, it was a divine message, but at the same time, to do what he did by raising the level of thinking of those people that were in that vicinity, he did literally the impossible. So if somebody would have came who was a subject matter expert, for example, although they have their own place, they would have said, this is impossible. Why don't you go to, some other place, go to the China, Egypt, the Byzantines or something of that nature. But he made that happen. And going to Taif and being riddled with stones and pelted and, ridiculed, being called all of these things. Of course, there's a divine message, but at the same time, he was on the court, so to speak, as what we would call throughout, and as were the Imams. Coming to Sayyid Hassan, if I may, building on this idea, Brother Shan Abbas mentioned, and I alluded to, coming to our scholars and our marajit, leadership amongst women, is this something that some of our scholars have actually commented on and given permissibility on? And I think that comes to a bigger issue about what is the role of leadership and the marajit. If you could please shed some light on this concept, I'd really appreciate it.
So again, back to the point, we are talking about two different things, and I'm sorry, I'm bringing it back again and again and building on it. There's a positional leadership, as Brother Shan said. This is what's missing. In reality and practically, women are leading and effectively leading and influencing our communities more than any one of us can probably imagine, and even the youth. You see, there's this concept that's also being brought in academia about leadership, which is a recent concept. It's called serve to lead. So there's a book by James Stroke. It's called Serve to Lead, 21st Century Leaders Manual. So the idea of leadership here is not but by position, that because you are a marja, then you can lead the ummah, or because you are a judge, you can lead, or because you are head of a center, you can lead. There are many ways you can lead. The idea is you go and serve and provide what people need, provide the guidance, provide the mentorship and the tarbiyah, and then you can lead and people will come around you. Yes, there are certain social obstacles that prevents from positional leadership. Like if you want to compare it to the imam's times, of course, there's a big difference between what we're discussing and the imam's times. But if you want to compare to the imam's times, there were social also restrictions of the imams leading the state. The norm and the social and the society rejected the imams from leading the state. So, but did that stop the imams from being leaders? It did not. The imam continued serving the community, continued serving the societies through attending in the different mosques, attending the different within the system, within the places of influence, the places of power, and they made sure that they kind of protect the ummah as a whole and protect the communities who wants to be led by the imams within that. Similarly, most of our community members, if you don't have that position, in a sense, you're not leading an organization or you're not leading a community as a position, it doesn't mean that you cannot lead. You can serve the people and guide the people and continue leadership by either being within these organizations and making sure that these organizations are in the right direction and raise your voice within, of course, systematic way. We don't want to create a chaos. The imams did not create a chaos. The imams within the system, they protected the system, the generic system for the ummah, and they made sure that the direction is in the right path and the ummah doesn't go astray a lot from the right path, and make sure that there's a right way of leadership within the ummah, and continue doing that, and that, so we can serve through that. Now, yes, we are a product of our societies and our social norms, and some social norms that we have, they restrict us from many things that probably is allowed within the theological aspect, and probably is better and very good to have. And if I want to answer your question very specifically in terms of the woman being allowed to be a marja, for example, or being allowed to be a judge, yes, we have certain scholars who are maraja currently, they accept that and they say they are allowed, and we have some that they say it's not, from the theological aspect, that they are not allowed. But here we look at this position as a privilege. We need to look at it from different angle. Is this a privilege or is it a duty? The position of being a marja or a position of being a judge? If you look at it from the duty aspect, actually this is a relief for our sisters that they are not responsible for this duty. It's not a privilege that, oh, okay, I'm a marja, so let me practice this privilege and have it. And so when I'm not giving it to a woman, or the woman are deprived from it, then it means we are oppressing her. On the contrary, this is a duty that is a theological duty or religious duty that's restricted to certain individuals. So this is, again, another theological discussion that we might go to. Despite that, there are certain maraja in the Islamic seminary, they accept that and they allow that. And even the woman herself, at the end of the day, the woman who wants to become a marja or who wants to become a judge, she is following her own ruling. First, she needs to become a mujtahid, right? So despite what all the maraja now say, she needs to go study and go within the academic discourse and the academic research and becomes a mujtahid. And if her ijtihad allows her, so based on her ijtihad, not the maraja's now ijtihad, based on her ijtihad, if her ijtihad leads to the conclusion that she's allowed to practice this duty, being a marja or a judge, then she can. No one can stop her because she's totally a mujtahid. And she's like within the proper path of being mujtahid, and she that's her opinion, and no one can come and say, "Oh, your opinion is wrong," but if she's following the right way of a scientific way of reaching to this conclusion. Like the current Maraji who reached to that conclusion scientifically, no one goes and says, "Oh, you should not do this. Why you said this?" See what I mean? So, but my message here today for this panel, and we're not discussing a religious. We don't have a religious discussion, rather a leadership discussion, a community development discussion. The path is open. There's multiple ways to lead, multiple ways to serve, and believe me, I've been to many organizations around the world, within Africa, within subcontinent, from the Middle East, the West. Majority, if not all of them, have women leaders in them, and they would not be successful and impactful the way they are without the women and without the youth. So practically, it's happening from positional aspect. Yes, there are some social problems, and we are developing as human beings. Things are changing.
Thank you for that, Sayyid Hassan, that perspective. Shan, Abbas, you had something, please.
Yeah, no, I think the one takeaway we can take from this is that the word leadership and the word service can be interchangeable. Mm-hmm. Leadership is service. It is serving people. I think leadership in a community setting is not about, in my view, positional leadership, right? That can come, that can go, you can have certain terms in and out, but actually it's about service, from whatever level you do it, at the mosque level, giving out tea, giving out tabarruk at the end of whatever that may be, serving and caring for others actually is that leadership concept. So that's one takeaway I think we can take from the initial discussion we've had.
Absolutely.
Excellent, Brother Shan. And this brings the point that you mentioned about the youth, Brother Shan. I'm not generalizing. Some of our youth, they are looking for a positional leadership. They don't want to come and serve and help in the development of the center or the masjid or the mosque or the organization from A to Z, to go through this experience and the path that it requires through service to gain the wisdom to take the position. No, they want directly to come to the position and impose certain ideas and thoughts without going through this. People are certain positions, and whether they're elders or young or middle-aged, because of the certain experiences that they have, because of the wisdom that they have, and because of the time of service that they have. Yes, we have exceptions to the scenario, and that's why these organizations are not the exemplary organizations, but the top organization and the exemplary organizations, they are led by people who truly are serving, and through truly what they went through all these steps of serving people. People like Brother Shan, I can talk about him because I know him personally. He's my closer friend. When he was young, he was serving chai and serving the niyaz and serving this in the mosque, or emceeing and lecturing, and then madrasa school and so on, and step by step until he gained that knowledge about the community and the society and the needs, and then he kind of invested in that to serve.
Excellent. Thank you. Very, very well said. I think that's part of the authenticity of leadership. This is something that consistently comes up in the academic literature about being authentic. Do what you say. The Leadership Challenge, the book that I mentioned at the onset. Do what you say you're going to do. If you as an individual run an institution or an organization and you have one standard for the team and the rest of the organization, and you abide by a different set of standards, that usually doesn't go well for the authenticity. People see right through that. So if you're a company that's, if this is the example that comes to mind, that is based on cost reductions, and you're being very lavish in your own demeanor, and the companies, the rest of the team sees that, and the world sees that, it's not going to sit well with your leadership influence, so to speak. So I think these are very valuable points. And I think this comes to our scholars as well, right? When people see the taqwa and the wara and the humility and the aesthetics and the just being so, with the zuhud that comes with our scholars, they notice that these are people who are out for the best. It's part of their authenticity and their leadership. Coming to Brother Shan, Abbas, there's a question that we've gotten from our audience I want to start engaging with. And if you could build on this idea, the question is, how do we encourage the youth in our community to take on leadership positions? I know you took on leadership relatively young. So the question, and I'm just going to elaborate a little bit surrounding this, and I wanted to make this really real and very true for our audience. Like, say they see a problem in the community or a challenge or something that they want to address. That could be a mental health issue, for example. That could be something of that nature. Maybe we can take that example. How would you invite them to, or education, how would you invite them to, what steps would you advise them to take in order to tackle this problem and get involved as a youth in the community on a leadership endeavor?
Thank you, Sayyid. I think, for example, let's say you see a challenging situation in the community, or you're a mental health guidance counselor and you see that area is neglected, for example. My always view is to work within the system. So, don't, rather than being a revolutionary and changing everything, you go out there and find out who's in charge of certain areas and you start influencing them. If you remember, we spoke about influence being leadership. So you influence that particular agenda. Let's say, for example, for me, my agenda would be, and I want to do aid work, for example. So I find the right aid organization out there, and I volunteer, and I try and influence the quality of aid work that they potentially do. So leadership is about offering service. So you offer service to them, offer leadership, and then over a period of time, maybe there's a positional leadership opportunity there or not. Either way, it wouldn't really matter.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent. Building on this, I'm going to take a question to Sayyid Hassan that we've gotten from our audience. That is, the question is, how do we convince the elders in our communities to let the youth take on positions? So this is building on the same idea that, we have elders who are in positions, youth want to get involved, so they feel like there's some capacity that they have to let them in, so to speak. There's also, building on this further, there's this idea of an old boys club that has come up in a lot of our communities, that there's a certain group of people who run things and they don't let other people in, and this narrative is very prominent in our communities. So what would you say to someone, a young person who feels sometimes demoralized or feels like there's not a place for them in the community and they just have to wait until people move on?
So basically, I would start with, if I'm a young person who wants to be in a position of leadership, first thing I will start in reflecting what those elders brought to us and where we are at now. So basically, they are not there at that position out of nowhere. Again, there are certain small examples. People might come and argue with me and challenge what I'm saying, but I'm talking about generally. So the mere fact that we are now commemorating and holding majalis and having this discussion even on Zoom, being on the West, it's a result of the work of these elders. So when you talk to these elders 30, 40, 50 years ago, how many majlis there was in London or the United States or different cities in the West? Very limited, and most of them, they will tell you the first Husseiniya is in my basement in that city, and they will bring always that example, typical example. So we need to start from that aspect. Usually, when I was younger, I always tend to look at the negative side. It's like, oh, look at them, they're not doing this, we're missing a lot, and I would come from this aggressive angle, and that will reflect on the way I talk to these elders. It will reflect on the way that I communicate with these elders. It will reflect on the way I'm communicating with everyone surrounding me, because I always criticize, rather trying to reflect what they have done for us and learn from the experience that they've done, and trying to understand where they're coming from in the sense of the environment and circumstances that they were in, whether they were the first generation of immigrants or the first generation who started practicing the way we were supposed to practice. So when you look at that environment with the limited resources, the political aspect and political during that time, so we will start valuing more and more that what these elders provided us. And when we start valuing that, then we'll find also the areas, as Brother Shan just mentioned, the areas that are missing and these elders are not touching. So there are certain things that are missing in the community. There are certain modern things that are happening, and there are needs that we are discovering. Like you mentioned now, the mental health aspect. So it's a huge kind of area and field that no one used to talk about in the past, and now in the last 5-6 years has been talked about more and more and more. So why not talking about that? About, for example, career development aspect. Also something that we were not used to talk about in our centers and our community organizations. Also, as a field that probably our youth can come and contribute to. There are different also organizations and services that our youth are providing. I would bring an organization like Who's Hussein as a great example, being led by the youth and serving the whole society, beyond just our community members, and providing the food banks and providing all this help to others. Other organizations in London specifically, like Shabab Sultan, like Akbar Foundation, and I can name a lot. These are youth organizations and created by the youth. They are developing by service, by providing service and serving the community, finding a need and providing that need through either English majalis or through again the food bag example. So recently Akbar Foundation and all the youth that they were helping them, volunteering with them in London specifically, they start helping the deprived people, during this Corona time, and there's lots of needy people that they are there, and they're trying to help and provide food to the children in the schools, because it was like it was a break time, and children were not going to the school and they needed food. I see similar example in India. So in Mumbai, in my last trip to Mumbai in February, I saw a group of youth, and they are university students. And Shabbir, you were with me, if you remember. Sorry. And you can shed light more on that. And this group of youth, they created a very small clinic in a small area for our community. They started renovating few houses here and there. They provided clean water and so on. So they worked together, and they were able to create something. My point here is one, communication. Increase the communication. Communicate. Respect. So don't eliminate the past. We are here because of our past, because of the history, because of what the elders have done for us. Yes, we might disagree with them. We might have different methodology. We might find later, when we are also elders, that they were right. A lot of our youth now, they are doing what the elders are doing. They are not leaving their positions at the head of the young youth organizations. So if you believe that's wrong, why you are repeating the mistake? So again, communication, respect, and if there's no way in that specific organization, you can serve in other organization. You can serve within your own organization. You can create your own small clubs until you grow older and you become part of that. So you cannot give up on serving the community if the goal is service and as the leadership is through service, by just because an elder person sitting in a certain position telling you you are not allowed.
Very well said.
And I want to emphasize this last statement might be a bit revolutionary. I will emphasize again Brother Shan's point. Please, within the system, let's protect our heritage, protect what we have. The people who delivered to us what we have now, they sacrificed a lot. We might not see it now, but if we go and ask our parents and grandparents what they have done to deliver to us what we have now, there was lots of sacrifices that happened. So let's not just rock the boat and become revolutionary and try to change and break the system. Within the system, let's find the opportunities, find the right way and the best ways to serve the community. There's always room for service.
Shan, Abbas, please.
I mean, I agree. I agree with Sayyid Hassan fully. And I think actually it's not about having elders out. It's about a blend, having the youngsters with the elders, because elders bring a lot of experience. So I look at my time in World Federation. I was, Secretary General for about 8 years, something like that. Both times, or 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And both times we had a president over 60 years old, like Dr. Asghar Moldina in the first term, Anwar Ramsi second term. I mean, these are seasoned people, very mature, very balanced. They've got a lot of community service behind them. And I mean, for example, our president, Anwar Ramsi, the president we were with, recently, he is more laid back, but he wanted to view everything from a distance. So it was good. He allowed the youngsters to bring all the energy and enthusiasm, but then the final decisions he would play a major role in, as you'd expect. So I think actually it's not about having youngsters only taking over organizations. I think it's about a blend of having the youth with the elders together.
I think that's very well said. I know I can share my own experience in when we were in university in my undergrad days. There was an environment where there were a lot of us youth looking for leadership positions in our own communities, and for whatever reason, at times they were there, they weren't, whatever that may be. We ended up creating an Ahl Bayt society on campus, and it ended up being a tremendous blessing in disguise, because it ended up being an avenue for all the different Jamaat or community youth to get together on one platform, which wasn't happening before that. So starting organizations within the system in parallel or with collaboration with the system and others can actually be a very good thing. It can actually lead to things that you never thought would happen otherwise. And I think that's something that a lot of youth should feel. They shouldn't feel stifled by it. Rather, they should consider how can they build something and take on that leadership. I know who was Hassan was mentioned. I met some of the brothers who were very instrumental in founding the organization, and they were very adamant about not having any egos at the table and being very grassroots, and not necessarily saying that we're the leadership. In fact, they encourage each other to not use their entire names. If they have to use their name, they'll use their first name, and this is by design. And I think that's a very innovative way to take things on board. It doesn't have to be the old ways, although there may be a respect for heritage. Shias and Tashayyuh has gotten through very difficult times to get to us today. And we can't neglect that. We can't forget that. You read the history of Baghdad and other places and what happened. There were times during the Abbasids where, they would drain the blood of Sadat and Sayyid the Hassanis in the cement to do the groundbreaking ceremony. And this happened throughout. I mean, you look at what's happening in Kabul today with our brothers and sisters and parts of the world who are being targeted, followers of Ahlul Bayt al-Muslim. So this happens. And so that heritage must not be forgotten. But at the same time, there must be avenues to actually encourage. So I'm going to come to Shan and Abbas just on this idea. One aspect is the youth perspective. I wanted to say if you could maybe toggle from the elders perspective, or the community leaders who are in that 60 plus bracket, if you said, for example, or olders, what would you tell them to encourage them to try to foster, engage, and develop and groom leadership for the next generation? Any ideas there?
I think for them, no, thank you, sir. I think for them it's very, very important that they do that because of sustainability. So when you look at our institutions, our centers, our madaris around the world, it's very, very important that we get young people interested and connected to our institutions. I think there's a bit of a worry and apprehension, probably even the elephant in the room, Sayyid, is how much do our youngsters value these institutions? These have been passed over through a lot of hard toil, literally blood, sweat, and tears, and that has really brought these organizations to where they are today. Any organizations, whether they be, within any ethnicity of our madhab, all of them have gone through this kind of challenges through different periods of time. And it's whether our youngsters actually value them. I think there's a question mark there, how much involvement there is. And I think the elders are there, they have to encourage that. I think the elders can't be looking at the present, they have to be looking at the future. So they may be in a positional leadership sense now, or they may be, in some other leadership positions, or there may be background, influencers, etc. But really they need to think about the future, in 10, 15, 20 years time, have we cultivated, the right leaders to come in and take it forward? I think that should be at the very top of the agenda. And I think sometimes it isn't.
Very good, very good, very valuable, very noble advice. Sayyid Hassan, we have another question from the audience, and I was hoping I'd come to Brother Shan on this as well after. The question is, what courses or development programs are available to help us in these positions? So is there a way to train and to learn about leadership, it seems to see? So what courses or development programs are available to us to help us in these positions of leadership? Anything? I know, Sayyid Hassan, you do global work on various continents, and you're always dealing in leadership capacities. What would you advise someone if they want to learn or brush up on their leadership skills?
So basically, in this conversation that we had today, we mentioned multiple books, and say, Shabbir, you're a great reader, and I learn a lot from you and the recommendations you bring to the table. So there are multiple books that are out and known, that they kind of cover the whole leadership and how to become a better leader. The second point, and which was very useful for me from my personal experience, is to find the right mentor. So leadership and leadership development is a journey, and that journey requires the right mentor, someone who sincerely can help you and becomes your kind of mirror to find your faults and mistakes and weaknesses, and not use them against you, rather use your strength and abilities and potential to elevate these weaknesses and take you to the next level and make you a better leader and make you a better person. As we said, the journey here is for us to become a better human beings. The goal and the main goal and the noble goal is to have these attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to have, to become better than angels, to become at that high level and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the journey to become the better leader is to become a better person. If we are not, we do not kind of improve ourselves, and we cannot elevate ourselves, and we cannot teach ourselves and lead ourselves, believe me, we will not be able to lead others. And leadership by itself should not be a goal. In a sense, none of our maraja, and this is something that I always heard from different scholars and different teachers of the Islamic seminary, advanced teachers, none of them, they plan to become a marja. Yes, they equip themselves with the knowledge, they equip themselves with the required tools, they equip themselves and they dig deep in knowledge. And knowledge, if that opportunity came and that opportunity became a necessity, then yes, they will be there for it. Rather, they are going towards it. So we should not seek to become leaders in a sense that to lead the community towards a direction. We should seek developing ourselves and enhancing ourselves and becoming a better person. And automatically in that journey, we'll find people also wants to learn the same from us. It's like learn from our experience in developing ourselves and becoming a better person and a better human being. And then this is how you lead. You start serving them the same ways that a mentor taught you and served you to become a better person. You become someone else's mentor to serve. Now that can be on a teamwork effort, becomes an organization and become an organization that serves the community and serve different communities around the globe, or it becomes on an individual level that you serve few individuals and mentor everyone and his capacity, or it becomes at the marja level who's serving the whole community and impacting the whole humanity, or in a divinely assigned way becomes the messenger or the prophet or the ma'soom who's serving actually every creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate their position, to make them a better being.
Very, very well said. Very interesting that you kind of do the preparations and you don't really envisage it, but Allah will use you where He seems fit, and it kind of becomes part of the divine plan. It's very interesting. If you look at the ancient Greek writers, the Socrates and Plato and Aristotle in particular, they said that in theory that the first 35 years of one's life they should dedicate to learning as much as possible about all the various aspects of society, from politics to economics to philosophy to medicine and all that. And then once that, until this day in America, the minimum age is about 35, is 35 to be president. And it comes from that idea, that heritage about learning. And I know a lot of CEOs, they say the average CEO in America reads about 60 books annually just to get up with this. And there's a lot of literature that says leadership is learning. Even again, the leadership challenge says one of the biggest skills of a leader is continuous learning. That may be book learning, that may be actual practical learning on the ground. Shan, Abbas, I wanted to come to you on the same question about what would you advise? What courses or development programs are available to those in leadership positions, or might I add, need to be developed? That may be also as well part of that.
Thank you, Sayyid. I mean, there are courses out there running our community on leadership. So, for example, CoAge runs a leadership development program, Nasimco does, and so on. I think all these programs, are actually all about understanding yourself. So when you do these programs, I mean, I went to one many years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I went there. And actually, I thought it's going to teach me how to lead, da, 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 da. Actually, it just was, talking about my own strengths and weaknesses. And I think really the challenge of leadership is it's not really about leading. It's just about being a better version of you. Improving yourself, developing yourself, progressing yourself, and then that in turn can then help others. And I think leadership is about helping others more than anything else. So there's lots of books out there. There's lots of stuff on YouTube. I think if the person has that conviction that they want to learn and develop, then they're going to find those routes to do that.
Absolutely. And I want to build on that idea is really about learning yourself. I know there was this idea of I was reading a book called North Star that was talking about authentic leadership. And that's really, everyone has their own style and their own way of getting things done. And I think that's important. If I use my own example, I was part of the Ahlul Bayt Society in university. And when I was at the helm of leadership, and I'll be very frank about that, I know Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, he actually invited in the author of Good to Great, Jim Collins. And he said, look, you've said that these are the 5 levels of leadership, building on the works of Maxwell. And he said, I'm telling you, and he's now the richest man in the world as per statistics. He said, I'm telling you right now, I'm not a level 5 leader. I'm saying that I'm maybe a level 4 leader or something like that, but I'm not level 5. how do I get there? And essentially, by essence, he was saying, how do other people get there? Similarly, when I was there, I was definitely not a level 4 or 5 leader. I don't know what I was, but we weren't accomplishing. And what I realized there was, whether we accomplish something or not is really, it falls on the leader who's at the helm of leadership. If the team fails, that's on the leadership. And that's really important to figure out, what is it about inspiring, motivating, and understanding what makes your team tick, what makes the people on the boat tick, and what are they in for it. I know you leading with leadership at the World Federation, other institutions, Sayyid Hassan at the Mainstay Foundation, others. It's really about seeing, what are we here for? What's our mission? What's our vision? What brings us together to steer the ship together to get towards this goal? And if that motivation, if that inspiration is there, you'll find that the team dynamics may shift the sail and they're actually leading, as opposed to this idea of, you just start leading from the back. I think it was Mandela who said, or one of the great leaders said that, leading is leading from the back, and people imagining that you're at the front, like people thinking you're actually at the front, but when you're actually trying to lead from the back, they're the ones who are leading. We're as a leader, you're just maybe a figurehead at times, or you're just trying to bring consensus to the group. And I think another element that I wanted to add to this is, never neglect for our audience the power of a concerted few people who have a vision and a goal to change the world. All change in history has happened with a few people, a handful of people discussing something, passionate about something, and making the world move. I mean, you look at the social dilemma on Netflix today, and these documentaries, that a few people in Silicon Valley are controlling the whole world. That's one dimension of the world, of the equation. But at the other times, there have been other people who've sat and said, things need to be a better way. There's a better way of doing things. And they sit in a closed rooms at times, and they start a movement. And that movement many times changes the world. So I was wondering, as some parting words, as we draw to a conclusion, closing, or towards the end, I should say, at least. I think we may have a couple of questions coming in as well. But Shan, Abbas, if I can point this to you, and then I'll take it to Sayyid Hassan from there. Why would someone who's watching this, who may not be interested in leadership right now, or say, hey, leadership, that's not about me, I'm not a leader, I'm not somebody who that's fit for, what does this have to do with me? What would you say to that person in order to inspire them, to motivate them, and actually to get them to realize their potential and their capacity as an individual to make the world a better place?
Thank you, Sayyid. I think that's a really pertinent question. I think it all boils down to kind of the takeaway that we've gotten. I think really my main takeaway, both experientially and from what I've read, is that leaders, and this really has to be understood, are not born, right? They're made. Leaders are developed. Anybody can be a top level leader. Anybody can reach that top level. I think the most important journey is the journey of yourself. You're progressing and developing and refining yourself. Actually, what I would say to that person or anybody at home is, don't worry about institutions. Don't worry about what's out there. Worry about you. Focus on how to develop yourself. I mean, for me, from my community angle, on a selfish level, I've developed massively as an individual as a result of going through those experiences. Yes, we're doing it for the akhirah. That is our main goal. But actually, as a byproduct, you personally develop through it. So I think the first thing is get out there, get out of that comfort zone. The comfort zone is very easy at home, watching this, thinking it's for other people, not for me. Actually, it is for you. You've got that gift. There's something in you that you have that you can contribute, to the community, to humanity in general. So, first of all, know the gift, get out of that comfort zone and believe you can do it, because you can do it. You can change yourself, change, your conditioning, change things around you to make sure you lead. And I really think leaders are never born. Leaders can be made.
Very well said, very well articulated. So Hassan, if you could shed light on this idea of, why would someone want to be a leader? Why is this something that somebody should endeavor and strive for? And how does this relate to that person who may think that, hey, this doesn't have anything to do with me, this is for another group of people, maybe ego infested, or whatever the preconceived notion someone may have about what a leader is? How would you tell that person that leadership actually pertains to them as an individual?
So I believe, just Brother Shan said it in a very nice way, and just to add or summarize of what we've been mentioning in the last hour, leadership is about self-development and about serving, and it's in our nature that we want to develop ourselves to become a better person. So I don't want to think about the whole world and changing the whole world and putting that burden on myself and just shy away from it. Just if a simple concept that it's within our nature, that I want to become a better person, that requires a self leadership. So it means I need to lead myself towards the right direction. I want to lead myself to become a better person. And the moment I do that, then I become an example for anyone who's surrounding me. So that example is a leadership. Is called leadership by example. And then people might ask me, how did you do that? And if I show them and guide them of how I did that, that's I'm leading them through guidance and through service. And if I mentor them, that becomes even more and more. So basically what I want to say, the basic level of leadership is in each one of us. We're going to become parents one day, so father or mother. So automatically I'm going to lead my child. And in order for me to lead my child the best way, I need to learn it myself. I need to become a better person. So if any one of us has a goal of establishing a family and establishing a good family, raising good children, it means that they have a goal in mind to become leaders. So that's the necessity. So if you want to become yourself a better person, so you have an idea of becoming a leader. So that's the key point here. And you can. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us that potential to become better, and Allah wants us to become better, so we can become that good leaders.
Great. Brother Shan had a point, if I could please bring you in on this.
Yeah, no, I'm just following on from what Sayyid Hassan has said. I think it's very interesting how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the universe. And made the universal kind of systems and laws. So for example, in the Quran, we are told, if you thank me, I will give you more. You're giving gratitude to him, but in return, you're getting more. The same we have with charity, right? The more you give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in various, you hear it in the Quran, you have it in a hadith, it gives more back in return. And I think with leadership and with community work, the more time you invest, the more you'll develop. So yes, you'll have the benefit of the akhirah, but actually you will see those changes and benefits in yourself. It's just the way the laws of nature that have been developed.
That's very well said. So I want to actually ask a pointed question to each of you, and that's kind of naturally emerges from what we've been talking about is, well, what are the biggest leadership lessons that you've learned on your journey thus far? I think that's something that would benefit our audience in a number of ways. If I can come to Brother Shan, and then I'll come to Sayyid Hassan on this. In your journey through the World Federation, through all the different, starting at the grassroots community level, building all the way up, going to the World Federation, in your entrepreneurial endeavors, and throughout, I'm sure you've learned a plethora of different leadership lessons, either direct or indirect. Were there some that were battle tested or hard fought that you learned, and some maybe came easier? But what do you wish you knew now that you may not have known then?
That's a good question, Sayyid. I think there are many of them. I think the importance of maturity and wisdom, etc. But I think the most important is the one about balance. Being balanced as a leader is very important. So as we spoke about, working with elders, for example, getting that balance, having a balanced team. So for example, knowing your own strengths and weaknesses. So for example, for me, I'm not the most detail orientated person. So whenever I work in anything, I need to work alongside detailed people, etc. So having that balance is very important. I think looking back 15 years ago from now, I would say that to look at overall, for example, I would have begun with a lot of energy when I was 15 years ago, trying to do too many things. I remember when in business, this has definitely affected me. In community work, it's affected me. You want to achieve too much too fast. Now looking back, it's much more balance is important as well.
Balance.
I think there's one quote about balance from Jim Rohn. If you don't mind, I can share it with you. It's the challenge of leadership is to be strong but not rude, be kind but not weak, be bold but not be a bully, be thoughtful but not lazy, be humble but not timid, be proud but not arrogant, have humor but without folly.
Very well said. Very, very well. Thank you for sharing that. Sayyid Hassan, if you could please chime in on what are the lessons that you've learned on this journey about leadership, and what things that you wish you knew maybe then that you know now, and what could benefit our audience?
I believe if I want to mention one key point about the leadership attribute is sincerity. The whole concept of sincerity, being sincere. And I will share this story, although I don't know if I have time, but I will be very brief. So I mentioned this to a couple of my friends. I took a flight from London to Nairobi. That's around 8 hours. Then from Nairobi to Dar es Salaam is around 1 hour and a half. Then another flight from Dar es Salaam to Kigoma, which is Dar es Salaam is in Tanzania. It's on the eastern side, and Kigoma is on the western side. So another 2 hours of flight. And then when we reached to Kigoma, we had to take a small plane because the area we're going is not accessible by large planes. And we went into a mountain called Mahalla mountain. And then from there, we took a boat because there was no other roads for another like 1 hour and a half to a remote village. And when we arrived with the boat, we had to walk like into a mountain to a small village of 50, 60 families. And I reached in the middle there, I saw a mosque, and the whole village was gathered there, and they recited Dua al-Faraj. So when I looked at that moment, I was very, very kind of moved. It's like, what happened? How come this Shi'ism or the message of Ahlul Bayt and the whole the concept of imama reached to this area? And in the modern time now, it took me all these steps to reach to that place. What happened? And when you ask around it, it was because of a group of sincere individuals who were leaders of the community in the 60s. They flew to a marja who was very sincere in the Islamic seminary. And as they were describing what they are doing and the affairs of the community, that marja told them, please make sure that you teach the madhab of Ahlul Bayt to everyone surrounding you. And that sincere group, because of that sincere word, had an impact that Shi'ism reached to that level, that these individuals are in a better position from closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hopefully better position as the same group is continuing in development of these villages and these places because of the sincerity. None of them wanted just to become leaders. None of them wanted that just to show off and gain position and gain power. They all wanted to serve. So sincerity is key.
That's very, very, very well put, Sid Hassan. And there's just one point that I don't want to leave out that's related to that, because I hear this narrative a lot in our communities on either side of the pond, that sometimes people have this narrative that the scholars aren't doing their job, the ulama aren't doing their thing, and as if it's a sort of a silver bullet that they're gonna solve all the problems. I was wondering if you could shed some light on the leadership capacity of the scholars and what is their role, and how does that fit in with the role of the expectations of what other people have in terms of them solving all the problems? Where is this narrative coming from? Or where does it seem it's coming from? And what are some ways that people can understand that the scholars are doing something? If they're doing something, what are they doing? And how does that fit into this whole dynamic of leadership?
It's a very deep question, and probably we need a whole show for that. But
Sure,
I'll try to be very brief as much as I can. It's about managing expectations, say Shabbir. We always tend to look at people with a higher position with a lots of expectation. So Marja'iyya and our scholars are leaders of our community, but within a certain domain and spectrum, starting from our faith. So their main major responsibility that they put on themselves is how can they deliver the faith to us as followers of Ahlul Bayt to the best of their ability and the best of their understanding and the most accurate way possible. So they have the text that they have within their hands, all the hadith, and they have the holy book of the Quran. So how can they deliver that understanding and implement that understanding in the modern time the best way possible? And they're fulfilling that the best way. And no doubt, no one doubts that they are not doing that. They are the experts in the field. They are the subject matter experts in this field, in the faith, and all the other sects even and admits that and give them that credit that they are from that aspect leading in this area. However, we tend to expect more and more sometimes because of the respect that we have for them and because of the similarities that we draw between a marja and an imam sometimes. So in the lack of accessibility to our beloved imam, and we are not accessing and having access to our beloved imam, we tend to try to find a replacement. In our minds, that replacement is the marja, and that's why we expect everything from a marja. And we tend to forget that the marja also has a limited capacity in terms of resources, in terms of time, in terms of many things. So this is one angle. The other angle also, sometimes us living within our communities, we tend to believe and look at the world from the angle of our community in our countries here. whether the democratic system or the freedom that we have, or the structure that we have, or the legal system that we have. And we forget that the marja is looking at the Shia communities globally in every and each angle, and every and each, community or country in the world. They have diverse types of systems. They have diverse challenges, and economical challenges, political challenges, safety challenges, medical challenges. So every thing that he does and every position that he takes is based on that priority. So the prioritization system is very different. The way that they implement things and lead is very different. The question here, I will flip the question: what is it that we are doing? They will always, our Maraj are always going to provide guidance. They're going to provide support to the best of their ability. What is it that we are doing? We are responsible. So we are here living in these countries, having these opportunities. There are big opportunities. The stability that we have, whether it's financial or whether it's political, whether it's security, and the support system that we have within our systems. Of course, there are always room for betterment and improvement. I'm not denying there are problems, there are mistakes, there are oppressions. It's everywhere in the world. But relative to the other places in the world where Shia communities exist, we are in a much better place. So the question goes to us: what we are trying to do, what we are doing to improve and to lead and to impact and to influence and to serve. It's not what they are doing. What they are doing, they are delivering the faith to us, the faith, and all the way from the Prophet ﷺ and our Imams and Ja'far al-Sadiq as we are celebrating his birth, and all the Imams to now, 1400 years of faith. They are delivering it hand to hand and delivering it to us. And they're delivering that guidance and that experience and that wisdom of the Imams to us. So they're doing their job. What is it that we are doing with this message? What is it that we are using or helping? The same group that I mentioned in East Africa from Tanzania, and these individuals, these sincere individuals, and among them was a scholar also, which is the father of our beloved scholar Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi, the late Sayyid Akhtar Rizvi. So these individuals who went to the marja and who took the wisdom from the marja, and they were sincere and they felt that responsibility to change and impact, and they went back and they impacted, okay? They did it. They were not waiting for the marja to do it. They did not say, oh, marja, why you did not open the mosque there? Why you're not sending there? No, they went and they seeked guidance, and then they took this guidance and they start working more and more. Similarly, we as individuals in this community and other communities around the world, we need to do the same. We need to feel responsible. We need to seek guidance, and we need to perform the actions. We have the opportunities, we have the potential. We just need to take these opportunities and act upon them.
Very well said. We have one question, which I think is a very good question that we've gotten from the audience. I'm going to give this to Brother Shan Abbas and take some feedback from Sayyid Hassan on this. Is it important for our community members to show leadership at all levels in Western society, or is this not important outside of our community? So expanding this idea, that is it just community centric as our leadership, or should we be getting involved and should we be active in our society?
I think that's a really good question, because obviously we spent a lot of this time looking at it from the community, and that's the theme, I guess, for this and for the other topics that you have for this series. I think it's very, very critical to help humanity in general. So we can be leaders on kind of topical issues. So whether it be looking at, for example, global warming, looking at human rights issues, looking at kind of humanitarian issues, and so on. So definitely we should be doing that. Even I think on political issues, I think there is no reason, and I know Sayyid Hassan can add the religious angle here, but no reason why our community members, our youngsters, our youth can't be vying even for political office, so that we can get across our perspective, in the relevant and in the right manner. So no, I think everything we said not only applies to our community, but I think to society in general.
Very well said. Very well said. Sayyid Hassan, if you could please share maybe some of the Islamic perspective and the perspective at large.
I totally agree with the brother Shan, and it's not limited to just within our community. Part of our role, I mean, I'm thankful, Sayyid Shabbir, that you're always bringing the Islamic perspective to me. I'm not the expert here, and I don't want the audience to take that wrong perception about me. But
you're more than me. I can't speak for Brother Shan, but from my perspective,
I'm good. But I'm going to share this on what I learned from the scholars that I've talked to, and I asked these questions. So there are things that I don't know that I don't know. But specifically this question, I asked a couple of scholars, and I'm kind of reflecting what they are saying, not my own opinion in this. Our imams always, throughout time, they emphasize on coexistence. We find Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam in multiple narrations. Always they emphasize attend funerals, go visit the sick people from other communities, not specifically within your own community. So they are kind of telling us to outreach, to go beyond our community. We are not limited to our community, and beyond that, even if we look at the other communities living in the big society, in the different countries that we live in, other communities being from different faith or sects, they will not be able to be successful and influential and protect themselves unless they started going beyond and start integrate. Of course, when I talk about integrate here, we need to be very careful. What we mean by integration is, of course, with preservation of our value system and our moral and ethical system, and integrate meaning to coexist, to influence, to impact, to serve. We should help the others. Why we should not also just stay as isolated community and live in a bubble, isolated from everyone else. We need to engage with others. We need to help others. We need to serve others. Sometimes we learn from others. So we cannot be in isolation from the other community members or other communities within our society or within our countries. So the example I brought up from East Africa, that specific example was encouragement of da'wah. But now, recently, the similar group who are leading that organization, which is Bilal Muslim Mission, by now probably most of the audience know what I'm referring to. They recently visited our beloved Sayyid Sistani in the holy city of Najaf. It was probably last year or the year before. And the Sayyid here emphasized on a point. He says, make sure you create educational programs, academic education, and economical development programs. He did not emphasize on the da'wah and bringing more people into Shi'ism. He emphasized on education and economical development. So it's beyond just, so the impact here, when we have educated Shia Muslim, and when you have someone who's economically developed as Shia Muslim, his impact is beyond just Shi'ism. Is for the whole community, for the whole society, the whole country there, whether Tanzania or Kenya or other African countries, they will be what impacted. Answering Brother Shan's question about political engagement, when we go back to the code of practice in the West, they asked this question about participating in election or participating in political parties in the West. The answer is there. You can go and I'm paraphrasing. It says, if the experts in the field, meaning the experts in your community, those who are involved within politics or they have political awareness, they say that this is something useful for your community and they encourage you, then yes, why not? So they refer us to the subject matter experts. And when we go to the different experts and we talk to them, the majority say, yes, in order for you to protect yourself, to gain your right, and to benefit other societies and other communities, you need to be politically even engaged. Of course, there's a framework, like in the business, you're allowed to do business, but you are not allowed to do riba. And there are certain transactions that are haram. Same here, there is a framework. Certain things are allowed, certain things are not allowed. We need to always go back to the scholars and to the experts in the field to see. So the limitation and the framework is a different framework. We don't want to go into that discussion. So yes, it needs to be beyond our community. It needs to be more. We believe that we carry the message of Ahlul Bayt. The message of Ahlul Bayt is not limited to Shi'ism. It's not limited to the followers of Ahlul Bayt. It's for the whole humanity. The message of the Prophet ﷺ is a mercy to the mankind. So that mercy, if you want to be the manifestation of that mercy, we need to be mercy to the mankind. So every and each human being. So it's beyond just our Shia members or Shia community members.
Very good. Thank you so much. Very well answered, Sayyid Hassan. In the interest of time, I think we're going to draw the show to a conclusion now. If I could just get a one-liner from each of our respective panelists, some parting words for the road for our audience on the concept of leadership and any advice that you can give. I'm going to come to Brother Shan Abbas on that, and then Sayyid Hassan. Shan Abbas, any parting words of advice for our dear audience?
Yeah, I think for the audience, for everybody out there, I think that you are that leader. You know, it is you. Don't think that leadership isn't for you. It is for you. You know, I believe anyone, regardless of whatever background they've had. You've given the Abraham Lincoln story earlier on about how this person used to walk miles and miles and miles that became president of the US. Anyone can reach any height. But at the same level, we must keep that integrity. So I think it's important to value yourself, get out of that comfort zone, develop yourself. But throughout our journey, we've got to maintain our integrity. And this really comes from our madhab, actually. Our integrity concepts come from looking at Imma and how they manage in this sphere. So my parting words really would be leadership, and leaders are not born, leaders are made, they're developed. You can develop yourself. And there's no reason why you can't reach the very height of leadership in any form.
Very well said. Sayyid Hassan, parting words for the road, please.
So again, if I want to summarize, I mentioned sincerity. Sincerity is key. Be sincere. Do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to seek closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the key factor for success. And I would like also to share, since you mentioned good to great, Jim Collins. Also, I mentioned a true leader as a leader, when he fails or when there's a failure, he looks at the mirror. So he blames himself and he tries to understand what caused the failure through himself. And when there is success, he looks through a window. So meaning he looks at his team members and the community, and he gives that success to others. It's not because of him. So this again goes back to the humbleness and making sure that you are humble and sincere. And the last point is, don't seek position. Don't seek position. It's about service and about becoming a better person and a better community and a better society.
Thank you so much. As the last word for our audience, if 2020 has taught us anything, there's no guarantees in life. Do it now, whatever you have and whatever you're passionate for, and ask yourself, if not you, who, and if not now, when. Thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you in the next program. So much thanks to our panelists and our audience at home. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much.